Welcome to ES Ascension News. Coherence. Dear Ascending Family, this planet is ascending into the higher frequencies of plasma, which greatly impact the principles of coherence. Coherence is a necessary energetic principle to understand on the ascension path as we progress towards personal consciousness expansion. When we dismantle the old enslavement profiles from this reptilian-based controller society, each of us must make the effort to explore new models of spiritually beneficial behavior, focusing on those humanitarian traits that support individual and collective growth to help evolve spiritual advancement. As we undergo successive levels of bifurcation, this is the point where the decision framework comes in for each person. People make decisions based upon the kind of motivations, thoughts, and actions they have as general thought forms influencing their lifestyle. The higher the quality of overall energy made available to a person, place, or thing, the more stable and connected the personal and environmental experiences in that area become. Energetic stability increases harmonization within the overall energy available, and this contributes to increased coherence. As personal coherence increases, this increases the quality of energy that supports the higher functioning of the mind, emotions, and body. When coherence is present in the mind, emotions, and body, it supports spiritual links that connect us into our higher spiritual consciousness. The lower the quality of overall energy available to a person, place, or thing, the more unstable, disconnected, and chaotic the personal and environmental experiences in that area become. Energetic instability that is created from the loss of energy, as well as the inability to access higher frequency, contributes to the downward spiral of energetic incoherence. The functions of human thinking, human emotion and behavior, as well as the overall functioning of the physical body, will lose coherence when the frequency operating in that person is too low. As a result, all of these areas of collective human behavior are increasingly losing coherence on the earth when they are not capable of shifting into higher frequency patterns. If we refuse to change negative ego behaviors or address personal emotional conflicts, these mental and emotional blockages will persist. If intense emotional conflicts are not corrected, they produce energy blockages, which further block access to higher frequency and higher consciousness. When the extreme polarities present in the environment produce a mixture of coherent and incoherent energy fields, these combined forces will reach their highest peak of opposition. And when this happens, an energy split occurs. This event is called the point of divergence, which is when the fixed point of equilibrium in the energy field reaches maximum pressure and a bifurcation or frequency split transpires. This is the result of the equilibrium pressure that exerts force in between two opposing energy fields, one coherent field, the other an incoherent field, which cease to be able to coexist in the same time and space. The point of divergence that splits these energies apart acts to harmonize these energies to become more naturally synchronized to the frequency level to which they are best matched or most compatible. When the synchronization of these new groupings of energy occur, they align themselves to their vibrationally matched timeline. As well, they are matched to the probable outcomes in that timeline that are connected to that specific overall frequency. Frequency synchronization is how our spiritual intelligence aligns us to the best timeline in order to support our continual journey of spiritual evolution, so we can learn how to become more energetically coherent. Many of us are observing these patterns of bifurcation or splitting apart, and the synchronization of the energy fields based on personal resonances that either create, increase coherence, or lack of coherence. This occurs during the ascension cycle and impacts everyone and everything. Most people do not understand the principles of energetic coherence. Hence, this information serves the purpose to help better understand that coherence, or lack thereof, is the result of the present bifurcation occurring in the energies of the earth and is greatly impacting human behavior. Principles of coherence in universal law. Coherence is the main principle used to describe the synchronistic harmonizing of energetic properties that occur naturally within any living system to support the integration of that grouping of energy. The properties of coherence are the result of universal laws which apply to all systems of living things. In human systems, this impacts all of the functioning parts, thus impacting the functions of the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual layers. Therefore, if we truly follow the practices of the universal laws, practicing the guidelines of the Law of One, the eventual result of that practice will be energetic coherence. If we lose coherence within one of the four body system levels, it will affect all other links in the interconnected chain, and this will be experienced as a lack of coherence, which generates an energetic drain or blockage in the system. A system is coherent when each of its working components is beneficial, which is supporting the growth or function of the entire system. A system lacks coherence when one or more of its working components has a detrimental effect, which block the growth or function of the entire system. In order to understand the natural movement of energy, frequency, and consciousness, we will need to be able to define and discern when coherence is present, or when the lack of coherence, also called fragmentation, is present. Lack of coherence is what contributes to producing a state of entropy, which manifests as blockages within all interconnected systems of energy. Entropy, or the loss of energy, is what makes a system break down and fall apart. Entropy is what instigates chaos and destruction, where the system functions far less efficiently. When any system is losing energy from fragmenting, The lack of coherence present will increase dysfunctions, such as distortions, self-deceptions, and delusions in assessment of reality. When a person lacks coherence, they are unequipped to perceive accurately the larger picture. They perceive only what they want to see, and this contributes to self-deception and splitting behaviors. At this time of bifurcation, the unpleasant state of splitting behaviors caused from the lack of energetic coherence in the unhealed negative ego will be increasingly observed within people, things, and organizations. It is critical to not feed or promote any kind of anger, aggression, or violence, as this behavior contributes directly to splitting, fragmenting, and the lack of energetic coherence. If this inner violence is not corrected through attitudinal healing, it is the definition of generating self-induced mental states of hell, filled with obsessions, delusion, paranoia, and insanity. Thus, the natural goal of living energy or systems is to support the strengthening of coherence within all of its subsystems, as this is important in sustaining the energetic support to the overall system to ensure its survival and sanity. Sanity, in this context, is used to describe spiritually beneficial behaviors that support more energy becoming available for consciousness growth. The principles of coherence apply to us personally, collectively, and in every group, system, or organization on this planet. To build energetic coherence within systems requires a group consciousness agreement to support the goal of building these related positive qualities and spiritually beneficial energies that help further define and support the overall system. These many different links of energetic correspondence interconnect through principles of coherence to help unify all systems of energy, thus integrating and unifying energy within multiple groupings and layers of energetic fields describes the state of coherence. The state of being coherent is formed by unifying the sum of the parts to be united, so they form a synthesized whole. Coherence directly corresponds to the process of leaving behind individualistic expressions of ego, while moving towards expressing group consciousness or unity consciousness. Unified cooperation builds accountability. To participate effectively in building coherence within any kind of system, such as in our personal light body layers or in the state of group consciousness, there must be elements of willingness and unified cooperation. We will hit the block wall of our own making when we refuse to give up ego defense mechanisms and continue to spar with others in meaningless, circular debates in order to defend belief systems. Unified cooperation is recognizing the interdependence between all living things, with the desire to engender cooperation between groups of all living systems. In coherent systems, unified cooperation is valued in order to unify the whole in energetically beneficial exchanges for creating healthy, holistic systems. Cooperation becomes the natural behavior to align coherent groups synchronistically in a naturally self-organizing system that is arranged upon a core spiritual mission or humanitarian philosophy. Unified cooperation is only successful in environments of honesty, transparency, and heart, where self-interest is sublimated to caring about the larger group interest. In commitment to heart-based transparency and non-judgment, with the ability to let go of petty differences, group trust can be formed and bonded to be supportive of larger objectives. This also means that we are willing to cooperate with the necessary effort and experiences we may undergo, even when they are unpleasant, in order to help us to integrate our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual layers. Nothing that happens in our life is an accident. If we do not cooperate with our personal learning process, we stunt our growth and block our progress. In order to progress, we must accept that fear and conflict is a natural part of growth and learning. First, we must learn how to practice unified cooperation with ourself so that we can build inner coherence in our light body. As we increase personal coherence, we can develop the inner strength to consistently demonstrate that coherence in groups and relationships. Through unified cooperation, the consistent development of the group can better align towards mutual agreement that helps to build energetic coherence, congruence, and accountability within all members of organizations and communities. Accountability and personal responsibility for one's direct behavior and actions cannot exist without developing inner coherence. Whatever quality of energies we prepare our body to be resonant with or hold as a spiritual conduit, whether it is positive forces or negative forces, is what we allow ourselves to be in consent with. Holding intention and applying positive forces for our spiritual and emotional growth increases personal coherence, while indulging in negative emotions and harmful actions increases the lack of coherence. Whatever kind of force we are in consent with, whether we know this or not, is the frequency that our body and consciousness is subjected to through universal law. If we are reciting prayers of love and compassion in public, while we spread malicious gossip and fear in private, our split behavior translates into energetic actions that overpower the words we have said and hollow out true meaning. Practicing accountability is a direct part of developing inner coherence and supporting the integration of the personal layers of the light body. This means we do not have a duplicitous nature or a split personality that shows one face to the public and another face in private. As we increase our ability to be coherent, we show ourselves as we are, and there is an ability to allow people to be just as they are in that moment, without judgment. As we develop our inner coherence, the way we perceive events changes. We evolve away from needing to feed negative emotions, control outcomes, or the need to attack others. Being accountable for our behavior and choosing more evolved and higher ethical behaviors is how we stop the cycle of painful attachments, servitude, and bondage to lower spirits and their negative nature. These negative spirits will interfere with the function of our instinctual body, thus distorting our feelings and intuitive perceptions into creating pain, suffering, and misery. Coherent systems. A system is a set of interactive or interdependent component parts, forming a complex and intricate whole. Systems have many different layers and levels of components designed to work together, with all of these parts having functions that are interdependent. For these systems to function optimally, they must organize or cohere in such way to interconnect and communicate as an integrated whole. Each functioning part of a system has a behavior and interrelationship to other parts of that system. How well a part functions will have an impact on other functioning parts in that system. So clearly, if one part is not functioning well, it will impair other parts of that system from functioning well. When there is a breakdown in that subsystem, this effectively means that there is a lack of coherence present in the overall system of energy. If the coherence is unable to be restored back into energetic balance to correspond with the larger whole, that source of the lack of coherence will be extracted or removed in order to restore harmonious functioning to the entire system. If that source of disharmony, spreading lack of coherence, is not extracted or corrected, the system may suffer collapse. Building coherent systems begins with clearly defining stated goals or the spiritual mission, as it's designed for continued challenges of learning and for stimulating consciousness expansion, which leads to the energetic improvement of the entire system and all of its parts. Coherent systems are essentially accountability systems. They must have a clear theory of modeled spiritually beneficial behaviors that describe how accountability brings desirable improvements, which drive one's personal decisions to assess personal progress in spiritual development. Coherent receivers. Spiritual ascension is defined as consciousness expansion and includes the natural process of becoming increasingly energetically coherent, as well as integrated within our light body systems. Increasing our energetic coherence increases our coherent receivers and coherent transmitters of intelligent light language. This is the natural process of restoring energetic balance to our consciousness as we further our spiritual development. The human light body is made up of refined filaments of etheric webbing that act as energetic receivers and transmitters of intelligent and conscious energy. This is the developed plasmic light body function that allows us to communicate better with all systems of energy, whether dark or light energies, as we increase our range of sensory perception and intuition by developing our loving heart. When we are on the spiritual ascension path, we start to learn that energy, consciousness, or spirit has a very specific language through which it communicates non-verbally. This transpires organically as we embody our higher consciousness, As we start to build our light body, this also builds the energetic receivers and transmitters so we can exchange and communicate with many different levels of higher frequencies. Once we better understand that intelligent energy is conscious and consciousness is energy, we can build our own consciousness energy to become a coherent receiver in the field of electromagnetic signaling that is present in all energetic systems and fields. If we better understand the language of consciousness and we know what kind of signal to expect, as an example, intuition, feelings, symbols, numbers, and archetypes, we can better receive those energetic signals and interpret them more accurately. This is what occurs when receiving signals via higher sensory perception, as it is nearly impossible to interpret signals if we do not understand them through the confusion that is created in our mind or through negative ego bias. The negative ego creates noise and static in the field of pure consciousness, interfering with a high-frequency signal transmission sourcing from higher consciousness intelligence. The intellect and negative ego gets incredibly confused by these electromagnetic signals because it is incapable of acting as a coherent receiver or transmitter. The negative ego is unable to discern between noise, static, and distortion because it cannot understand the actual content of a coherent signal being sent as a consciousness transmission. We can perform a basic test on the coherence of our spiritual communication links by honestly assessing how well we have remained neutral, peaceful, and if we have maintained observer consciousness while in stressful or chaotic situations. When we are in neutrality and peace, even while facing intense challenges, we directly increase the accuracy of coherent reception and transmission of information. Coherent transmissions are energetic transmissions where the receiver is coherent and is capable of comprehending the type of intelligent energetic data that is being sent. The faculty of creating a coherent receiver is created by the consistent development of our higher sensory body functions, in conjunction with clearing our intellectual need to control the content of that data when it is perceived by the mind or negative ego. This is why it is critical to identify negative ego patterns, unconscious, impulsive behaviors in ourselves and clear them from exerting automatic control reactions over our mind and body. These negative ego thought forms are primarily masked behind inferiority and superiority judgments cast upon others, or blaming something or someone in the environment as the cause of one's unhappiness and misery. As we develop observer consciousness by finding neutrality in all things, we have a more accurate sensory perception in any type of energetic transmission or circumstance. The uncleared negative ego superimposes overlays on top of the consciousness stream of intelligent energy, which generates a lack of coherence, distortions, blockages, and an extremely limited perception of those energies or events. Therefore, we must be diligent in removing the noise and static generated by the undisciplined negative ego, projecting thoughts into our minds in order to have more accurate higher sensory perception and a greater ability to discern correctly the many different forces and energies that we are exposed to. A perfectly coherent, energetic signal may appear to be noise and static to the intellect if the person is only looking at a small part or the wrong part of the entire frequency transmission. To have optimal faculties of receiving electromagnetic signals of consciousness energy, we need to know the language of energy and learn how to receive that signal through our heart-based feeling and sensory bodies without ego judgment. The optimal receiver of electromagnetic signals is our pure and loving heart, which comes with the development of higher frequency consciousness bodies. Spiritual or energetic transmissions are out of sync with the intellectual processes of the mind, so that the transmission interpreted by the negative ego will always produce errors in frequency, errors in phase, and thus errors in deciphering the messaging. Coherence improves personal competencies. To develop and support coherence and congruence in directing personal energies towards building an integrated light body, and simultaneously to define overall supportive energies within coherent systems, it is necessary to establish agreements towards personal goals for reaching a higher order of competencies. These ranges of competencies can be described as emotional competencies, mental competencies, communication competencies, spiritual competencies, as well as relationship and social competencies. Social competencies are required in building coherent systems involving group consciousness, which are intrinsic to the development of comprehending psychological and emotional factors that may impact the overall social group and influence the individual selves in the group. It is productive for all people to develop social competencies, to be aware of how to identify and neutralize negative impacts that may arise in the social dynamics that mirror reflections within any type of group, community, or organization. Seeing these mirrored reflections in everyday life supports self-mastery skills that help to define basic competencies needed to become increasingly coherent. Becoming coherent is a necessary requirement in order to connect and communicate deeply with one's inner spirit, and these skills are not taught in the current educational model stemming from the controller pillars of society. The biggest challenge of any coherent system is to retrain the group to not think of competencies in terms of rank, status, or power, but as a method to obtain personal goals of self-mastery and self-achievement that cannot be compared to anyone else. Thus, the group must be hyper-aware of the pitfalls of judgment, comparison, and putting others beneath or above you. We must learn to retrain our mind to be with others as unified equals, while being able to recognize specific competencies that yield no value difference but may define a role for that person to be productive to support the group's overall goal towards building more coherent systems of function. In order for us to commit to any kind of group goal with a continual incentive, we must have personal resonance, or feelings of inspired purpose, with the group promotion of those same goals. In any kind of social construct, if the group goals are not important for an individual, he or she will lack coherence with the group and have no incentive to be responsible towards collaborating with others in the group towards achieving that goal. The lack of energetic resonance clearly means it is the wrong group consciousness or social connection for that person. There is no right or wrong in personal resonance, but it is the responsibility for each person to figure out what their core resonances are and to choose things that support that resonance. Understanding our personal resonance comes from our developed self-awareness. If we do not know ourselves well, we will not know our own resonances. If a person in the group refuses to honor or respect the group goals, this will create an increased lack of coherence. This is what breaks down trust and breaks down the strength of the overall system, which eventually must be corrected to achieve rebalancing. The ascension cycle is about shifting out of old paradigms of control and manipulation that are commonly used to exert power plays in social situations, as these power plays are used to enforce hierarchical methods to define value systems based on rank and file. To combat these common negative ego patterns we have seen enforced in society, family, and in the world at large, we must dismantle our instinctual desires, which overlay controlling behaviors that attempt to unconsciously or consciously reinforce these beliefs, assigning power based on ranks and hierarchies. True leadership is about embodying the role of being in service to the whole, serving the health of the greater good for each part that is included in the complexity of any kind of unified group or organized system. Each person has the personal power to choose to develop self-leadership, which takes on another dimension in service to the whole. Organized systems are needed to direct project goals and require an agreement of unified cooperation from the group of people involved in order to achieve that higher goal. Without unified cooperation, there is no accountability or enough energetic coherence present in the group field, which influences the larger goal towards becoming unsuccessful or ineffective. Thus, on the path of integrated ascension, which naturally increases inner energetic coherence, we must take responsibility for our behaviors, actions, and choices. This is especially magnified while participating in group projects, group goals, or communities, and we must honestly decide if we are willing to undergo these challenges in order to increase our personal competencies. The choice of re-educating oneself into supporting humanitarian goals and being willing to explore the higher concepts of learning required to achieve those goals are the personal responsibility of each individual during this intense time of spiritual ascension. We can choose to retreat into isolation while blaming everything and everyone around us for the negativity that we feel. Or we can stop feeling bitter and realize that we are interconnected with group consciousness, whether we like it or not. To find our way through the insanity of the psychological control and emotional manipulation, we must remove these negative ego beliefs, biases, and divisive attitudes from our own behavior. As we get spiritually stronger and clearer, we refuse to succumb to the reptilian order, overlaid to reinforce social structures based on fear that are designed to manifest the consciousness enslavement of the entire planet. How do we, as human beings, start to practice new standards of behavior and implement these paradigm shifts in our day-to-day lives? The first step is to establish goals that re-educate people to rethink their ingrained attitudes and automated belief systems that have influenced their thoughts and behaviors into promoting fear-based thought forms. When we are paralyzed in fear and confusion, we will use control and manipulation of circumstances and people in order to relieve the internal pressure of our anxiety. When making the paradigm shift from the individualistic and self-absorbed ways of thinking and behaving into supporting the higher good, we will naturally be pulled into circumstances to find coherence within group consciousness. As we evolve towards group consciousness in order to help define personal competencies while participating in a group, a model must be provided that describes these higher concepts and guidelines of coherent group behavior. Those guidelines include setting new standards for defining certain qualities of thought, behavior, and actions, not only as a personal achievement, but to be held accountable for those behaviors by the group witness. As an example, a group agreement may include the practices of loving compassion or harmless interactions with all people, devoid of religious or spiritual rhetoric, as one goal in modeling higher concepts of personal behavior that help to grow and support humanitarianism. How well each person in the group can adhere to that group agreement is helpful to define competencies for each person that has made that agreement while participating in the group. It gives the opportunity to actually practice and model that higher standard of spiritually beneficial and positive behavior in one's self, while reflecting that peace to others. As the capacity for personal coherence increases, this serves to strengthen the group agreement, which allows for the potential increase of energetic coherence for the entire system to be greatly multiplied. Re-education training for ultimate expression. In ES Community, we describe the higher concept for defining new thoughts and behaviors as based upon practicing the basic principles of the cosmic sovereign law of one. This is because these are the universal natural laws which define and govern the highest expression of love that is the source of our divinity and inner spirit, the source made possible through the ultimate expression and embodiment of the crystal consciousness. When we practice the Law of One guidelines, we automatically access unity consciousness, which connects us to crystal consciousness. Thus, we become increasingly coherent in all of our systems of energy. Spiritual ascension is the process of spiritual initiation, where we undergo tests of personal mastery in order to demonstrate our competency level before we can move on to the next frequency, dimension, or consciousness expansion experience. On the ascension path, we are given a series of life experiences based upon our personal blueprint, designed for higher learning to support reaching our ultimate expression or heroic probability. In the course of our lifetime, our competency level is being tested in order to determine if we are ready to spiritually progress to the next frequency and consciousness level. This is purely an energetic resonance process, devoid of intellect or judgment. We must embody the higher frequencies of aligned resonances, and we can be harmed if exposed too quickly. If we hold unhealed inner violence while we are being exposed to high frequencies in our light body, whatever is hidden in the unconscious will explode to the surface, potentially creating more confusion and trauma for that person who is not prepared for what is occurring. Comprehending new ways of thinking about our life as a consciousness experience lesson on Earth during the ascension cycle helps us to assess and recognize that we must have accountability to all of our thoughts, behaviors, and life choices. If we are committed to the re-education process that is required to expand into our highest spiritual consciousness, this path will create important learning opportunities that help us to gain major improvement in our competency levels. As we become more competent and confident in dealing with any kind of life situation, positive or negative, we increase our energetic coherence, which directly impacts our level of access to higher consciousness. When we are a part of a spiritual community or group consciousness based upon the law of one, it generally raises the bar for adopting more rigorous ethical standards that help us to gain quicker access to personal spiritual learning that is helpful in the development of the self-mastery process. These rigorous ethical standards are reflected in the needed strengthening of one's moral character, finding personal accountability towards behavior or actions within that group, contemplating the nature of personal ethics, which all describe personal competency levels. We must decide if the inner resonance is there to commit to the spiritual ascension process, as it will challenge us to develop increased coherence in every interaction we have at every level of our life. This is for our highest good, with spiritual evolution in mind, yet it may bring us great challenges so that we can master our fears. This is where the decision framework comes in for each person. Some people do not value a spiritual platform where unconditional love, forgiveness, compassion, and peace are the set goals for achieving coherence, while practicing higher standards of ethical behavior with others. Instead, they may believe that these are qualities and attributes of weak and ignorant people. Each person must decide if they are willing to be aligned to their purposes of spiritual growth by accepting the challenges they face, which help them to build increasing competencies within themselves. If we refuse to recognize life challenges as lessons and opportunities for spiritual growth, we are missing the most important message. There is no right or wrong answer when it comes to making decisions in our life or within our spiritual development. It is merely reflected by the state of consciousness we have achieved in that moment. However, if we refuse to change, our spiritual growth can be easily stunted, and we return back to repeating old and limiting patterns of behavior. Our personal energetic influences will give shape to our motivations. Our motivations influence our perceptions. Our perceptions influence our belief systems, and these beliefs will influence our actions and choices in life. Thus, this is the time to reflect deeply on knowing our authentic motivations, both hidden and on the surface. As we more deeply reflect on our personal goals and priorities in life, we must find the goals relative to us and hopefully seek to improve upon them, which is the natural process of consciousness evolution. Emotional competence. To build inner coherence and ultimately find harmony with the world as it exists now, the first major task is to improve our emotional competency. Emotional competence refers to one's ability to express or release one's inner feelings and emotions in positive or productive ways. It allows the ease to communicate with other people, the ability to face stressful challenges without indulging in destructive behaviors, and determines one's ability to effectively and successfully self-lead and communicate in social situations. Emotional competence is an essential social skill to recognize and interpret, including the capacity to respond positively to emotions in ourselves and others. Emotional competence creates an increased energetic coherence, as well as improved health through avoiding stress that comes as the result of suppressed emotions. It leads to improved relationships, since destructive emotions are far less likely to be expressed, while appropriate communication is not avoided through unhealed fears of triggering some unwanted emotion. We all can learn to free ourselves from anger, hate, resentment, vengeance, and other destructive emotions that cause hurt and pain. When strengthening our character by increasing our tolerance and compassion for others, we help to develop emotional competence, as well as more confidence and self-esteem. These qualities help us to have a better understanding and interpretation of what is actually happening around us, which increases our accuracy in the discernment of events. Negative and destructive emotions that are suppressed and hidden greatly cloud our discernment and interpretation of events in our life. What emotions can you recognize and describe? How well can you interpret what your emotions are telling you? How successfully do you respond to emotions in yourself and others? Without personal goals of desiring to increase our emotional competence and being honest with ourselves, we risk playing out destructive emotions in our self-talk and when interacting with others. Unfortunately, if we do not heal our negative emotions, we will become prisoners of this inner violence without understanding why we have been consumed in pain throughout so much of our lives. When we are prisoners of our own inner violence, we are in bondage to the negative behaviors that fuel levels of psychosis or neurosis. This unhealed state of inner violence leads to splitting behaviors of the negative ego. As a result of the bifurcation, if unhealed inner violence is still present, these uncleared negative energies create a lot of pain and suffering that commonly produce splitting behaviors in people. For more tools, see emotionalcompetency.com. Splitting behaviors. Splitting is a very common ego defense mechanism that results in a lack of coherence or fragmentation. Splitting, also called black and white thinking or all or nothing thinking, is the failure in a person's thinking to bring together the dichotomy of both positive and negative qualities of the self and others into a cohesive, realistic whole. Usually, one small piece of the overall picture is focused upon, while ignoring other details that the person is not willing to look at. It can be defined as the division or polarization of beliefs, actions, objects, or persons into good and bad. By focusing selectively on the judgments or perceptions of positive or negative attributes. Splitting is a coping mechanism which diffuses the internal anxiety that arises from our inability to grasp the subtleties and complexities of a given situation or state of affairs. The situation is broken down into smaller parts. In order to simplify and organize the situation in such way that makes it easier to think about and to rationalize the way we think. Splitting also reinforces our sense of self as good and virtuous by effectively demonizing all those who do not share in our same opinions and values. Through the course of growing up from childhood into adulthood, we develop coping skills of labeling people, places, or objects in the environment as acceptable or not acceptable according to our belief systems. Ego defenses are similar to mental racketeering programs, commonly used as coping mechanisms for reducing day-to-day anxiety, fears, and obsessions, which are related to thought addiction or the need to control the environment. When we are addicted to our thoughts, we have lost balance with our feelings and sensory abilities. These allow us to be fully present in the moment and to be in receptive mode in order to better discern the environment and its energies. Such a narrow compartmentalization of opposing energies leaves the person using splitting behaviors with a distinctly distorted picture of reality, which is limited within a small and restricted range of thoughts and emotions. It also affects that person's ability to attract and maintain relationships, not only because splitting is exasperating and draining, but also because it can easily flip at any moment. One day, friends and lovers are being thought of as personified virtue, and then when something displeases them, they may suddenly think that same person is evil or bad. This is a flipping back and forth. As we learn how to refocus our thoughts, we can prevent overwhelming states of emotion from triggering impulsive behaviors and angry reactions expressed as splitting behaviors. As we develop strong impulse control, we are learning a form of ego discipline through applied patience and diligence. If we check in and find that we do not like what we are feeling, we can better understand the reasons for that by further shifting into the observer mode. We call the process of shifting from identifying with a thought or feeling into neutrally observing it the observer mode. This requires moving ourselves into the compassionate witness. As a compassionate witness, we have no judgment of thoughts or feelings. We hold no judgment of what we are observing in the external. We only observe those thoughts and feelings in ourself and others. When we can fully observe through our own compassionate witness, we then have the possibility of becoming neutral and centered. Then we can find relief from our inner anxiety, fears, and a host of other thought distortions. This process is key to shifting ego defense mechanisms, thought addiction tendencies, and releasing the anxiety or fear of feeling the emotional depth or pain that contributes to splitting behaviors. By continually using an ego defense mechanism to avoid facing the source causation of the anxiety or deeply rooted fear, which is unresolved pain or trauma, we are only perpetuating the mental looping, which uses denial of the truth in order to avoid feeling pain or discomfort. Denial of accurate accounts of the truth is the seed of all ego defense mechanisms that stunt our continuing path of emotional and spiritual development. Please only take what is useful for your spiritual growth and discard all the rest. Thank you for your courage and bravery to be a truth seeker. Until next, stay in the luminosity of your avatar, Christos Sophia, heart path. Please be kind to yourself and to each other.